This is our annual event, which is particularly aimed at practitioners within sport. So we're thinking a lot around educators, physios, nutritionists, coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, performance analysts, lifestyle advisors, a whole range of people who are working with athletes. You're so vitally important to keeping sport clean and to protecting sport in the UK and internationally. There should be some really interesting sessions for you today to help you fulfill your responsibilities. We're also pleased to welcome the research community as well. So this event for us, we call it the front line because we're particularly thinking about how we can equip people with knowledge who are working with athletes to keep sport clean, but also how we can then bring that together with research that's coming through from the academic community. And you'll see those themes coming through in our sessions today and tomorrow. This will be recorded and available afterwards, so that should hopefully be useful to you. To introduce myself, my name is Emily Robinson. I'm currently the Interim Chief Executive of UCAD. Last year, I hosted this event and I'm speaking to you as a Director of Education and Strategy. So that's my background within UCAD. I'm delighted to say that we've launched a report today that should be available to you, and we'll make sure you can see it in the Q&A function later. It's called the Coach Education Research Project, and colleagues from UCAD and one of our former colleagues who's come back, Emma Brunning, will be talking to you about the results of that research that has come out today. So over the 2 days, we're going to have a focus, as I say, on education, research, learning, supplements, some very specific hot topics. We're going to look at over the 2 days. We'll have some particular sessions on working with para-athletes, intelligence, and evaluating athlete education. You may have seen UCAD's strategic plan that we published earlier this year, and hopefully what you can gain from that is a real new emphasis on research and innovation. So we've created for the first time a research and innovation function. We're really looking to harness all the existing data that we hold, to gather all the knowledge that is already within the anti-doping system, to work in partnership with people who are working already on anti-doping research projects, just to really make sure that what we're doing is effective and useful. And later on, my colleague will be talking particularly to you around the start of that insight and innovation work stream. So I know that we're all pros now at how to participate in Zoom webinars. We've very much got used to this over the last 18 months. You'll be aware that you can put your questions in to the Q&A button, so please put them in at the Q&A button. You can keep those coming as the presentations are going, and the speakers will pick those up at the end of their presentations to answer those. We have got a hashtag, as you can see there, hashtag CSFL 2021. If you want to join in the conversation on social media platforms, you can do that using that hashtag, and you can post messages to us as well on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn using our social media channels. And we will have this session available afterwards. Great, so hopefully that explains what we're going to do. We've got a couple of hours today and then a couple of hours tomorrow afternoon with slightly different focus. So we're going to start with an overview of insight and innovation at UCAD. We're going to ask Dr. Nikki Costa to present that to you, and she'll be taking through the next session, explaining what we mean by this and what we're hoping to achieve.
Hi, Nikki, it's Charlie. Really sorry to interrupt you, just still on mute.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that, everybody. Okay, so sorry. Thank you, Emily, for the introduction, and welcome listeners to the first session of our Clean Sport at the Frontline event, where I have the pleasure of introducing you all to our newly formed function at UCAD, the Insight and Innovation team. My name is Nicola Costa, and I'm the Research and Innovation Lead at UCAD. And please let me remind you to submit any questions you may have throughout the presentation using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. So slides don't seem to be moving. Am I showing my slides okay? Okay, here we go. So I joined UCAD a little over a year ago as a team of just one, but the organisation was already beginning to take steps to enhance its research and innovation activities. Just a short while ago, UCAD launched our new strategic plan, which covers the next 4 years. And within that is the objective to enhance our insights into the constantly evolving threats to clean sport in the UK and globally. And that objective is supported by the following aims. Firstly, we wish to harness the latest research to inform what we do. We want to engage with research projects that bring about a benefit to our organisation and embed those findings in what we do. We also want to stimulate the research agenda for interested partners. So by establishing the areas of greatest interest and priority to us, and by communicating those externally, we hope to develop new partnerships and also receive targeted research proposals linked with those priorities that we can get involved in. We also want to deliver a truly sustainable research and innovation agenda. So we need to procure funding for commissioning research projects, and that's likely to come through a variety of methods, including supporting research proposals to funding bodies like the Partnership for Clean Competition, WADA, and the UK Research Councils. We will also seek commercial investments and establishing partnerships with academic institutions with whom we can collaborate and jointly fund projects. Then finally, we want to share what we've learned, and that's both internally across our organisation to ensure that information isn't siloed within one department, and importantly, also externally as well as at events like today. So to help deliver that objective within our strategic plan, UCAD have formed the Insight and Innovation team, where I am now joined by Sam Paul, who leads the team as the Head of Insight and Innovation. We report in to our newly appointed Interim Director of Strategy and Education, Tony Josiah. And our team's responsibilities can be summarised into these 4 categories. Firstly, we will work across our organisation in the design and refinement of our research and innovation agenda. We also want to improve our engagement as an organisation with research institutions based both in the UK as well as overseas. So we really want to develop those mutually beneficial partnerships where we can integrate the findings and then researchers can demonstrate the real life impact of those research projects. Thirdly, we wish to commission those research studies and pilot projects, and also to review and support research proposals that we receive. And with respect to innovation, the 4th category here, so looking outside of anti-doping, are there approaches or technologies that are utilised by other sectors that we could embed within our organisation that we could benefit from? So in terms of our research priorities, our research agenda, which has been developed through an expansive mapping exercise looking at the world of anti-doping today, we will focus our efforts across these 4 main work streams. So the first focus would be on the prevalence of doping within sport. So can we obtain a reliable and valid estimate of doping prevalence in the UK? And we look forward to supporting a wider working group in this area and hope to launch our own involvement later this year. The second work stream, which probably comes as no surprise, is all about drug detection. So projects aimed at improving our detection rates for prohibited substances through enhancing analytical methods, but also implementing new sample collection techniques. So an example here would be the implementation of dried blood sampling, which I'm sure many of you have already heard about when WADA released a new technical document describing its use earlier this year. The third work stream is monitoring and evaluation. So this looks to finding ways we can measure the effectiveness of our anti-doping programs, using our data to feed back into the system to enhance what we do. Then the 4th category has its own strategic objective as well, which is securing the data capabilities, tools and techniques to optimise our use of data. So this work stream is likely to be achieved through partnerships with academia, other anti-doping organisations who are already involved in this area of work, as well as the private sector. So looking at each of these work streams a little more closely, we have identified a number of specific research questions. The question of doping prevalence is probably the biggest and most challenging question to answer. Conventional drug testing indicates a prevalence at around 1 to 2%. However, there are research reports on prevalence estimating doping at anywhere between 2 and 70%. Prevalence studies are notoriously difficult to undertake due to the inherent difficulties of obtaining accurate and reliable data, including direct surveying of athletes being confounded by socially desirable responding. Sometimes these studies are underpowered, that is, the number of athlete participants is insufficient for statistically sound conclusions. They often have poor validity and/or reliability measures of the evaluation tool, and most commonly they are sports and/or population specific and therefore not universally applicable. So we need to thoroughly assess the prevalence of doping in the UK by sport and by level of athletes. And in doing so, we will be able to benchmark our efforts in the fight against doping. As mentioned, the drug detection area of research is not surprisingly the bread and butter of anti-doping research. Research in anti-doping is dominated by studies seeking analytical, scientific, and technological advances. And although anti-doping science has seen remarkable progress over the years, much to the credit of improved mass spectrometry-based methodologies and instrumentation, there still remains significant deficits in areas of detection of doping substances and methods. The major gaps in anti-doping science appear to be in the development of more economical and robust sampling handling procedures, the most promising of which is dry blood sampling. This is an area of research that has achieved significant interest in the last few years, and even more so during the last 18 months or so during the COVID pandemic, as others around the world have demonstrated its benefits in its ability to enable athletes to collect their own samples during times of lockdown and social distancing measures. Secondly, we still face challenges in detecting autologous blood transfusion and other modes of blood doping. Therefore, we wish to increase our efforts in the development of analytical methods that can definitively identify these prohibited methods. And lastly, there is a need for more sensitive detection tests for peptide doping, such as growth hormone, its analogues and releasing factors, as well as ESAs. We wish to improve our existing methods to widen windows of detection, detect lower concentrations, and importantly, identify changes in concentrations of these substances, which distinguishes doping from normal physiological fluctuations. All of these challenges must be met if we are ever to achieve doping-free sport, and progress depends on innovative applied research which can adapt and develop novel technologies. So as previously mentioned, the monitoring evaluation piece is all about how we can measure the effectiveness of our programs. We wish to examine how we do things, seek better ways to understand the impact we have, to look at ways for how we can do things better. So in each of these identified areas of UKAD's operations, we have devised a list of questions we would like to answer. We hope that by sharing these with our international counterparts, to academic researchers and to the wider industries, that we may invite innovative initiatives and learn how others have faced and overcome similar challenges. And that links very nicely into our final work stream of data analytics. As we become more able to gather data and gain insights, we need to be able to process and analyse it effectively, understand what the data is telling us, and how we can use it to improve our processes and inform our policies. We also wish to understand what data we don't have, but that we need. So here we are looking at learning from where others, both within anti-doping, but also outside of our sector, have utilised technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data analytics that can enable UKAD to use our data to make better decisions, gain greater insights, and undertake strategic operational movements. So I've hopefully demonstrated the areas of primary interest for us, and now I'll say a bit about how we would accomplish those aims. Clearly, we must engage with academic researchers and anti-doping experts across the UK and globally. And so by publicly announcing our research agenda at events such as this, but also on our webpage, which launches this week, we hope to stimulate interest and offer the opportunity for academic researchers and other stakeholder partners to submit expressions of interest towards research projects. This is an open invitation to interested parties to submit a project proposal that addresses any of the identified research priorities. So we invite you to download the application template from our website, which guides applicants to the level of detail we would like to see in the proposals. The other method is through specific calls for proposals. These are invitations to directly address a specific research need, typically commissioned directly by UCAD. They will be promoted periodically throughout our webpage and channels such as LinkedIn, and we will produce a call document which details the purpose of the intended research, the available budget, and the time frame in which to conduct the project. These will have specified application windows in which we would accept proposals for review. In addition to the traditional routes of research, the Insight and Innovation team welcome innovative approaches from other organisations, particularly from other sectors, offering novel methods towards tackling our challenges. And so we wish to identify strategic partners from across the academic and industry sectors who may offer expertise and opportunities for cross-pollination that can develop innovative methods in analysing our data and deliver novel solutions. We therefore invite potential partners to work with us to understand our challenges and offer them the opportunity to show us how we might make progress in our ambition of clean sport. So lastly, I wish to invite you to get involved. As practitioners in sport, we encourage you to get in touch if you have ideas for projects or solutions to our challenges. You can email us at the email address shown here, or check out our webpage at ucad.org.uk/research. In particular, we are calling out for ASPs to get in touch in relation to a project that will be presented shortly by my education colleagues Paul and Claire. So watch out for that opportunity for you to get involved and have your say. And that just leaves me to say thank you for listening, and I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much indeed, Nikki. Just a short introduction. My name is Charlie Bosworth. I'm the Head of Communications at UK Anti-Doping, and my role today is just to make sure that the sessions all sort of segue into each other nicely, and also to field any questions. So the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen is where to submit your questions, and then we'll put them to the presenters. I've got one for you, Nikki, which is, I think, the prevalence issue is something that is fascinating and almost seen as a bit of a panacea when it comes to developing strategies for combating doping in sport. But the big thing in my mind is how the collaboration between international partners and other anti-doping organisations will work. And clearly, this is a massive job. So I was just wondering, maybe you don't have the answer today, but whether you could just give us a little bit more info on what your thoughts are on that side of tackling that big problem.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charlie. So UCAD will be working hopefully with the WADA's working group, which is a working group obviously set up through WADA, who are based with academics who are very interested in this field and tackling this challenge. And this working group will be working with a number of anti-doping organisations across the globe to establish, or validate rather, I should say, a method that they've already started working on, which is the Doping Prevalence Survey tool. And this is a method that's been published in the literature already. And there was a presentation of it just before Christmas, actually, through WADA. And this prevalence survey tool, based upon this crosswise model, which allows athletes to anonymously or confidently answer questions on sensitive questions such as doping in this survey tool. And the idea is that WADA will hopefully use this tool as a worldwide survey tool that standardizes the methodology that we assess prevalence across countries. And that way we can then identify or compare quite clearly the prevalence across countries. So that's the idea. And hopefully, as I say, UCAD will be participating in that, the validation of that method and using that survey tool later on this year.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. So yeah, we've had a couple of questions through. Actually, Adam from Loughborough Uni just wants to confirm when the open call for collaboration will start. Nikki, I don't know if that's something you can answer now. Otherwise, we can contact people.
Expressions of interest are open now. We've always been very keen and eager to hear from any in the academic world or say elsewhere. So developing experts across the globe. So we've always been very good at listening to research proposals that come through. Now we have a formalised way of doing that. So we've got this expressions of interest route. As I say, you can find out information about that through our website. We have a template for proposals, project proposals that you can download and submit your expressions of interest. The other route, as I say, the calls for proposals, they are specific calls when we have identified a specific project that we would like to address. So there aren't any calls for proposals at the moment. We've had a few earlier on in the year, but we have to be producing some more before the end of the year and next year. So do keep an eye out on our webpage for specific calls for proposals as well. But if you have an idea of a project already in mind, to say, check out our website, download the application template and put a proposal together and just drop it into our inbox.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Nikki. Okay, we're going to move on to our next session now, and this relates to what Emily touched on in her introduction at the top of the hour, and she talked about the new report which UCAD have just released today. I've put a link in the chat function there, so obviously not now when you're paying full attention to Emma and Claire when they're delivering their presentation, but do go ahead and read that, the story on the UCAD website, as well as being able to access the full report. But not wanting to jump the gun on their presentation, I'm just going to hand you over now to Claire Lane and Emma Brunning to talk about the hot off the press report. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I'm just going to keep my camera off just because my internet's unstable, but for questions, I'll pop that back on. So firstly, thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. I'm absolutely delighted to share our research on the evidence-based Coach Clean curriculum. Today, I present on behalf of myself, but also Laurie Patterson, who works for Leeds Beckett University. And Laurie is a senior lecturer in sport and exercise psychology and also specialises in anti-doping research. There are so many people involved in this project and research. Just so many people. It was a fantastic thing to be involved in. So just going to share today, if I can just move on, the why we went about the project, the who we spoke to, the what the voices were from the coaches and organisations, and then the what next. So what are we actually doing with this research? Because it's so important if we've got evidence-based research to action it. So the why. So UCAD has been increasingly aware over the years that the increased emphasis in the role of an athlete support personnel and also their contribution to clean sport behaviours is essential. They also identified coaches as key influencers to athletes, sort of acknowledging the importance of coach education and how coaches play an active and positive role in clean sport. This project was developed to create a curriculum that will enhance the work already done by UCAD to support every level of coach within the UK. So UCAD, when we decided to do this project, UCAD sought support from Leeds Beckett University and therefore Laurie Patterson, due to the depth of experience they had, the number of research projects that already existed on anti-doping, and also the current project they were already involved in for WADA, so developing the international framework for coach education. Well, it's certainly been exciting and enlightening. I've worked with so many passionate coaches and organisations. Every conversation was fascinating, and people wanted to really get involved, support us, and share their experiences and also their stories to date. So before I get into all the detail, I just wanted to thank each and every person that got involved and supported the research and basically helped to shape clean sport coach education in the future. So as you can see from this slide, it might look a bit busy, but this is how busy we got, is the project was conducted between January and May this year, so 2021. It was a systematic consultation that was conducted with a range of stakeholders using multiple methods. And this was to capture the voices of coaches working in different contexts. So we sort of wanted to make sure that we addressed a lot of sports, different age ranges, sort of what the stage of the athlete, whether they're competitive, non-competitive, and with very different levels of experience as well. So you can see from this slide, we held 12 one-to-one interviews. These involve people from NGB, stakeholders, key influencers, policymakers, organisations and sporting bodies. They're really fantastic, and the stories that came out and what people were sharing was just fantastic. I felt very privileged to be part of that. We ran 5 focus groups, and they included coach developers, national trainers, high performance coaches, children and young people coaches, participation coaches, and talent coaches. We also put a survey out, which you may have been involved in, and we were really pleased that we got 341 responses. And you can see there, it's covered 56 different sports. There was a real vast range of sort of age range, mix of experience and coaching status. And we also spoke to 7 national anti-doping organisations, and these we spoke to really about, they were responsible for their coach education and they helped inform this project as well. Firstly, we looked at existing research and projects such as journal articles, existing curriculums, published papers, and wider social science research reports, just to make sure that we were on top of everything that was current and we weren't rewriting something that already existed. Now, to everyone that we interviewed or asked questions or to get involved, we asked 2 main questions, and that was, what has the coach's experience been to date with clean sport education? And around that, we asked smaller questions such as, how was the education delivered? What do coaches remember learning? Do coaches use this within their existing role, etc.? The second big question was, in the future, what education would be useful for coaches? And smaller questions around that would have been, what would coaches like to learn? How would coaches like to learn? How might this be delivered? And what might clean sport education look like and feel like? And so they were our main questions. So before we go on to this research study, we just wanted to acknowledge the past research that has happened. Now, I can't take any credit for this, just hands up on that. This is all Laurie Patterson's and her team's work, but I just wanted to, I guess, acknowledge what's happened before. So when coaches have been asked in the past, the current research, when coaches have been asked in the past about perceptions of clean sport, coaches have generally been in support of anti-doping efforts, i.e. seeing doping as wrong, unethical, and they support the sanctions. And they generally see themselves having a big influence on their athletes. Despite this, other coaches did not see clean sport as part of their role. So potentially this related to the lack of confidence they had. Some coaches reported or demonstrated low knowledge in the anti-doping topics. And this left many coaches inactive, quite passive when it came to supporting clean sport behaviours. When we looked at their education experiences, coaches reported that often traditional ways of reaching coaches had been through inviting coaches to engage with athlete-based resources and opportunities. or general coach education. So rather than for their individual needs or sport, they were put together, and sometimes they hadn't seen the relevance. In addition, much anti-doping education had focused on rules and compliance, such as the prohibited list, rather than sort of positive strategies of how to be clean. However, this shift is starting to happen, and there is more emphasis now being placed on value-based programs. Despite this, positive findings were that individuals who had learned about anti-doping rated themselves as much better equipped. They felt much more confident, and therefore they saw that some education is definitely better than none, and that was just down to the confidence it gave them. Preferences for education, so how would they like to be educated? So thinking about how to enhance coach clean sport education in the future, coaches in previous research were supportive of integration of mandatory education. They called for this to comprise of multi-methods, such as sort of informal, formal and non-formal education. They asked for interactive learning opportunities that facilitate not only understanding, but also their skills and confidence in applying what they've actually learned, and make sure it's applicable and they can put it into real life practice. So basically, coaches wanted to debate, discuss, share good practice, and relate to real life sport specific scenarios. So I'm not sure I've done that total justice, but I hope I have. And I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledged the research that has gone on in the past. So our survey insights for what we conducted, I found this absolutely fascinating. So we saw that 71% of coaches that completed the survey had no clean sport education. Now, from that 71%, 79% said they were unaware of any of the education available. More coaches when we asked coaches about had they ever had experience of doping behaviours, what we found out is more coaches had experience of doping behaviours than they had education. And I just thought, wow, this is an amazing opportunity to shift this and change that and support all those coaches around us. When we asked coaches, most coaches had not considered certain behaviours as red flag moments until they were explored further. And a lot of coaches missed the basics of what doping in sport could look like, or gateway behaviours. So I've got a great example. Again, like I got the opportunity to talk to so many coaches, and it was just fascinating. And I had this amazing coach come up to me, and we had this great conversation about one of her athletes had been started to give caffeine pills, and he was only, the athlete or the kid, let's say, or the child was about 6 or 7. And their parent had started giving them caffeine pills to perform better within their competition. And the coach had brought this up as a subject and hadn't really considered it, considered potentially the health implications and the concerns they had, but they hadn't done anything and didn't really know what to do. So she was just bringing it in for discussion, really. But so we talked about it, and I said, oh, what was the impact, or what happened over the next couple of weeks or months or whatever? She went, you know what happened was a lot of the parents that associate with that one parent that offered the caffeine tablet started giving their kids more caffeine tablets. So within about 2-3 months, the whole team, like we're talking about children here, were on caffeine tablets before they raced. We explored it more with the coach, and she saw there was so much opportunity to educate the parents and inform them of the potential health risks, but also the gateway behaviours and what we might be telling our kids that is okay. So basically, when this was explored, coaches informed us that they now saw opportunities for intervention. The coaches from the young people and participation groups had little to no clean sport education, and the above group again had the highest experience of witnessing doping behaviours within their sport. And just to finish this slide, I think there's just, from everything that's been said and those very few insights that we're sharing, there's so much opportunities to support coaches within their education and more within that with like their education and understanding, but making sure it's applicable within their environment. So this is going to be the voices. These were our interviews we also conducted. So for those having had clean sport education, they reported these opportunities have mainly been via their NGBs, Coach Clean and the online Clean Sport Advisors course. When I was asked what they remembered from the education, the majority listed those in line with WADA's international standards for education. So rules, regs, sanctions, how to check medication, with a small percentage not remembering anything about their education at all. When coaches were asked about their experience of clean sport, they reported really positively around accessibility. So it was easy to find, easy to use. Clarity, it was straightforward, it was easy to understand. Thoroughness, it was detailed and extensive. Utility, it was useful and interesting. And they also commented that the face-to-face experiences that they had were described as well presented, smoothly delivered, and fun and interactive. On the more negative side, coaches described experience as being tick box exercises, being quite dry, heavy and bound to compliance, the feeling of information rather than education, and the need for more interaction. Coaches also suggested that learning opportunities were limited, e.g. not frequent enough, few and far between, and only brought to attention when something needed renewing. So then the coach's experience, they went on to describe, there was a lot of information that was not always presented with the learner in mind. The content had not been always brought to life, and they often felt there was too much information and overwhelmed. They also described the assessments when we asked them that they often had to be repeated until they were passed, but this didn't actually represent they'd understood and learnt it. They just memorised what they needed to. So often that made the coaches realise they hadn't really recalled much within their education. Often education was a stand-alone element rather than being integrated into a course of some sort. So the relevance for coaches was not always obvious. So coaches called for organisations to think carefully about what they need to know and what is nice to know. So for instance, assessing coaches on if they can remember the exact length of a ban per violation felt unnecessary. Rather, they could just simply know that a ban does occur. It is possible that some of the basics were also missed. So to the point where coaches might not actually be aware of what doping actually is. So e.g. like consumption of certain products that could be contaminated. The high performance coaches seem to have very positive experiences with their education by attending the sessions targeted at their athletes. And then when we asked the coaches for future considerations, they talked a lot about, they're all really passionate, it was fantastic, but they talked a lot about each coach being unique, the need to tailor-make education experiences for their sport and the level of athlete they're working at. There were strong calls for embedding the clean sport education into the national governing bodies, and this may help mitigate the coaches' feelings that clean sport education is transactional. It also may help ensure that the currently underserved coaching groups like age group or participation coaches were supported. Overall, working closely with NGBs, so national governing bodies, was suggested to achieve a clean sport feeling like being part of everyday practice rather than just a course that you do. So basically integrate it into the fabric of coaching. In terms of how clean sport education is framed, coaches suggested moving from compliance messaging to empowerment. So create curiosity and think about the barriers. Often coaches described that they were not allowed or they felt they could not talk about this subject. And so communities of practice could be forged, and there seems to be like sort of a really strong movement for that. Basically, they said the highlights here would be coaches suggested that small pieces of information provided frequently would really help coaches to digest the information. They asked for relevant scenario-based learning and up-to-date examples of doping cases. Coaches emphasised the need for storytelling to bring topics to life and to help coaches to understand what places somebody at risk. So what we were just talking about earlier, those red flags or those gateway behaviours, and that including social influences beyond sport. I'll just skip this one. Okay, so I hope you're still with us. Just this slide left really before I pass over to Claire. So what we found, recommendations from the research, what we found was coaches asked for varied education, so quizzes, videos, events, face-to-face learning, online learning, to make it interactive, so scenario-based, case studies, storytelling, make it frequent. So if it was embedded with NGB courses, make it everyday conversation, create community of practice and open conversations. Bite-sized learning. Most coaches were suggesting nothing more than 20 minutes at a time, or thinking about different ways of communicating, like via social media or apps. And then make it progressive. So opportunities are available for every stage of coach. Something to move to and grow to seems essential. If we go down a block here, provide clean sport content on a range of topics. There is loads of coaches really passionate about going, this is a duty to care. We want to learn about how do we have these hard conversations. We want to know rules and regs and sanctions, but there was a lot more about values and how to have those conversations with athletes. We would like to enhance visibility and accessibility, and bring it to life and make it relevant. If anything, I think that was something that nearly every coach we spoke to or person involved with coaches sort of highlighted, make sure it's relevant. And then framing. Framing is key. Move to empowerment and not fear. And then just at the bottom there, embed clean sport in the fabric of coaching. So make sure it's an everyday conversation and occurrence, like to talk concerns over, to chat about clean sport and how to support our athletes, and just not once a year. And then put golden threads through all the education, all the programs, basically help the coaches to help others. And just want to thank you to every single person that has been involved, and it's been really, really fascinating, and we've got so much data, and I'm sure hopefully you'll read the information and what's being presented today or what's gone live today. I'm just going to hand over to Claire Lane now, because she's going to talk through the what next of this project. So we've done the research and just handing over to Claire for the what next.
Thank you, Emma. Just to remind people that are hopefully still with us, if you could submit any questions you've got for Emma or I into the Q&A box, then they will be fielded at the end. So as Emma alluded to and as mentioned, and I'm sure many of you are aware, you may have even completed the course yourself. The Clean Sport Advisor course is still available at the moment, and that will shortly in the next month or so be moving into a new title, but a very similar basis called Introduction to Clean Sport. And that's essentially going to provide a platform for coach-specific education to then be built upon that. Becky Diamond later will also discuss more about the Clean Sport Hub, and so we'll learn more about that then. But these particular research findings and the insight we've gained from the research, excuse me, has really informed our thoughts on how we're going to develop that coach curriculum going forward. And it's given UCAD the opportunity to review what we offer at the moment through our e-learning and face-to-face, and how we're going to promote it and embed it into coach training per se, to ensure that those numbers of people that have received education does start to we'll try and redress that balance as to those that encounter doping behaviours versus those that have had education. We want to get that the other way around. So we're going to try and retain an element, or we will retain an element of e-learning, albeit in the bite-sized versions that people are asking for. And we're going to introduce some form of blended learning. So there'll be those scenario-based learning approaches. And we're saying that will be subject to the kind of level of impact that a coach will have upon athletes. So the introduction to clean sport will be an ideal basis for a participation type coach who would maybe work at the lower levels of the athlete pathway, and obviously a very good grassroots level where we want to ensure those coaches still getting the education. And there will be some elements of scenario-based work built in there, but coaches working across the performance pathways will be more likely to be invited to join group discussion forums focused around those scenarios, again, keeping them bite-sized, keeping them interactive, so we can try and enhance their confidence and build that positive attitude towards clean sport in the environments that they work within, and focus on where those opportunities for intervention are, and so we can work on that. We're looking at working with key partners to establish that community of practice that Emma mentioned, and we're currently exploring what that might look like across different environments and what resources we could develop to encourage that engagement with clean sport across the coaching landscape, right from participation through to performance. Next month, we're due to announce a memorandum of understanding with the Chartist Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity, or CIMSPA, as you may know it, where the aim is to embed this clean sport curriculum for or within the professional standards for coaches and associated personnel across all levels. That's an exciting time. And like I said, we're looking at working with other key partners as well. In terms of timescales for this, we're hoping that such changes coaches will see within the next 12 months. So you can be assured we've listened and learned from this research, and we are going to take that forward in our planning. So thanks to all those coaches that took part and for their honesty, because that's what has helped guide us to this point. And of course, thanks to Emma and everybody at Leeds Beckett that contributed all their time and efforts into getting it into one place. So hopefully there'll be a tailored approach from this point onwards. We're working on that. I'm now going to hand back to Charlie to see if there are any questions for either of us.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Claire. Well done, Emma and Claire. That was a fascinating insight into the work that you guys have been pulling together. We've got a couple of questions that have come through. One was for Emma. You talked a little bit about compliant messaging versus empowering. That might just be a bit of academia speak that I didn't quite get my head around, but could you just explain a little bit more what you mean about moving from one to the other?
I think a lot of the coaches were talking about often there had been fear, or there had been sort of threat within messages that had been put out there, like you must not, and sort of those sort of words, to rather than empowerment of we can support our athletes. So that's what we meant with that, and a lot of coaches brought that up.
That's really interesting. And do you think that's come from a bit of an established narrative around the role of the coach in protecting athletes and their role as maybe seen as key influencers in behaviour, and unfortunately sometimes, as we've seen, not in a very productive way in terms of athlete welfare and anti-doping?
In terms of the messaging? Yeah,
I'm just wondering if one is a result of maybe a more entrenched narrative of how coaches can or how coaches are an influence on athletes.
I personally don't know where that messaging has come from, so I can't really comment on that. But I do know that coaches, I think, do a very, very hard job, and they're very complex jobs. So I think in terms of the education we give them, we need to give them as much support and encouragement and guidance and signposting as possible. And if we can do that, I think it will take that pressure off our coach community.
I think one of the biggest sort of standout stats from there was around the gap between awareness and actually taking up education opportunities, and we saw that with our Coach Clean promotion that we did during Clean Sport Week this year, where we put a concerted effort behind the promotion of the free online course that's available to anyone, but focused for coaches. And following that concerted effort, we saw a huge uptick in people taking up that opportunity. Is that the sort of, I guess, from a communication side of it, just thinking from my own sort of work streams at the moment, is that something that you would endorse in terms of specific promotion for those opportunities?
Oh, the Coach Clean course is free, it's online, and it doesn't take long, and it's broken down into different modules. So even as it exists at the moment, it's a great opportunity for coaches just to sort of start that journey, even if you don't know anything about clean sport at the moment. I found it when I did it, it was really informative, it was useful, and actually it started to enable me to think differently, even when I'm actually out there coaching or supporting coaches or athletes. It's given me enough information, and actually sort of I've got a little bit more thirst for clean sport and I want to learn more. So it's definitely worth looking at.
Nice one. We've got a couple more that have come through here before we move on to the next session. First of all, Moira, just giving you a bit of a shout out, saying definitely sent you on the right track. Great work. And Scott has asked, how aligned were coaches and National Federation wants and needs? So was there any difference between what NGBs were looking for and what coaches were looking for specifically?
We're totally aware that NGBs have got so much on. So when we spoke to national governing bodies, they were like, that'd be lovely to do, but obviously their coach education programs are full, and to add another element would have been their concern. So in terms of alignment, this is what the coaches were saying, is like, we'd love it within, like, integrated into the NGB courses and their coach education. Whereas the NGBs weren't saying no, they were saying we'd love to. However, what do we shift, or how do we make this work? So it's just working together, and maybe it's something that we do in terms of UCAD, is create a standalone course, but that could be integrated for NGB. So I think if you could create something that supports NGBs, that would be the ideal. But yeah, that's sort of the voices I was hearing.
Excellent. Okay, we've got to say an anonymous one, which maybe just picking up on the comment that I was chatting about before, is that around messaging again, which sounds like you've definitely struck on something that's appropriate there. So this person is saying that in my experience, the messaging has often felt like we've seen people like you do this before with athletes, even though in 16 years that I've been the model of ethics for others in sport. So yeah. Excellent work. Keep that up, whoever that was. But it sounds like that's definitely chiming, as I say, with attendees today.
Do you know, I think every single coach said this. It's like often just from a few coaches, they get a bad rap, but coaches work so hard, and most do it because they're passionate about supporting, helping people. And yeah, to then get a message that's not particularly encouraging or supportive, I think could be heartbreaking for the coach. So I think, yeah, getting behind them is essential.
Excellent. That sounds like we're onto something there. Excellent. Okay, so I'm just trying to read this one as well. Okay, so we're about to move on to our next session now, I think, but do keep the questions coming in, and if there are overlap, our speaker is going to be hanging around, so we can come back to some of those as well. So we're now going to move on to the next session, but with a familiar face. Claire is doing back to back, but supported by Paul, who is the head of education at UCAD, and they're going to talk about athlete sport personnel, their influence on clean sport. Thanks, guys. I'm just bearing with things here. Paul's just getting his screen up and ready. Here we go. That looks more like it. Oh.
Apologies, everyone. Just give me a second. I can't see where I need to.
You've just hit display settings, Paul, I think, on that top.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I can't see that.
To the right of there. One more. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, I can't see. Sorry, but yes, everybody. Can you see it, Charlie?
I thought you were just hovering over it just then. Left a bit.
Sorry about this, everyone. It worked earlier.
There we go. Looking good, Paul.
Got it. Got there in the end. Right. Apologies for that, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Charlie. And thank you for joining us for the next session, which, as Charlie has outlined, was a research project we commissioned looking to gain some greater insight really into UK athlete support personnel's behaviours and their key influences on clean sport. A very similar project in so many ways to the work that Emma and Claire have just presented on. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, be sure to use the question and answer function to submit anything that does spring to mind throughout the session, and we'll happily answer those for you. So Claire and I will provide you with some insight and context and the why really with the purpose for commissioning this important piece of work for us. I'll then explain the overall project aims, about what we really wanted to achieve with this particular project, how we went about it, and then I'll hand over to Claire, who will look to share the key findings with you all, along with the athlete support personnel education preferences, and the next steps of where we really go from here. So to give you some context and background, the International Standard for Education requires all signatories, where possible, to ensure their anti-doping education programs are evidence-based as best they can be. So whether that's considering existing published research or working with researchers and institutions to gain a greater level of insight to help inform future developments and ensure everything is as learner-centered as it possibly can be. In this particular context, athlete support personnel are identified within our education strategy as a really important group of influential people who work with athletes on a day in, day out basis, both within the daily training environment as well as on the field of play. So we developed a research brief and a call for proposals, and following a number of high quality submissions, we selected and appointed the Clean Sport Alliance Group with world leading researchers from Leeds Beckett University, Kingston University, as well as the University of Birmingham. So looking at our existing e-learning provision, as you may be aware, we've already provided education to athlete support personnel in the form of the Clean Sport Advisor course, which is a free online course, as Emma Running just mentioned a minute ago. This has been in place for a number of years now. However, in line with our education strategy and our approach, we're really keen to ensure that we create the best possible education and learning experiences for this group of practitioners, ensuring our offer has been designed based on their insight, not necessarily what we feel sat in UCAD and based on our own thoughts. We're really keen to understand what they actually require from us. A lot of practitioners are required to actually complete this particular course, a Clean Sport Advisor, as part of their role, especially in that high performance community. So we really wanted to understand what it looked like through their eyes and what it is they specifically wanted from us. We also identified from the outset that they were really interested in a number of specific roles. So based on the existing research and from speaking to the Clean Sport Alliance research team, we're really keen to focus this particular piece of work in the those sorts of athlete sport personnel operating in the high performance and the elite community level. So we focused on performance directors, nutritionists, physiotherapists, sport doctors, strength and conditioning coaches, physiologists, and performance lifestyle advisors. We obviously recognize there are a lot more athlete support personnel roles. However, it's those specific roles that we felt we wanted to understand more about.
Just
so the main...
Should you have moved on to the next slide, Paul? Sorry.
No, not yet.
No, okay, that's fine.
I'm all good. Thanks.
It's okay then.
So the main aims of the current project were to understand the athlete support personnel's perceptions of the importance of clean sport values. We also wanted to understand their level of current anti-doping knowledge. As I said, they're obviously required to complete this particular course, but we really wanted to understand what the impact of that advisor course has had on them and what their knowledge retention was like. We also wanted to understand what their confidence was like based on their knowledge and how confident they feel in having a conversation with an athlete and advising them as best they possibly can. We were also really keen to understand what their experiences of working with or interacting with UCAD have been and what else they may want from us. And finally, we were really keen to understand, going forward, looking to the future, what the most useful ways they would want us to create education in the future for them to target their own education. So moving on to look at how we went about this, the research team were fantastic in helping shape how we should approach this and the methodology we should use, which, to understand the current state of play, a literature review was an obvious starting point. So following the search, it only returned 7 applicable studies that were found, really, that have been published since 2015. All these particular studies were non-UK based, so it didn't actually include anyone from the UK, and we're really centered around student-based populations from within pharmacology, kinesiology, sports physiotherapy, student physicians. So there's really a limited amount of literature published in this particular area in comparison, say, to the coach education literature review that Emma spoke about earlier, which has a considerable amount in comparison. We then moved on to creating an advisory group. So this was really an experienced group of athlete support personnel that we knew from our contacts, which was 6 individuals, 4 female, 2 male, and their role really was there to validate the survey before we actually disseminated that. So they were incredibly helpful in helping shape that and even providing guidance on just reducing the number of questions and simplifying it. There's an element of duplication in a couple of questions. So again, just having it run past that group just before we sent that out was a really useful, beneficial step in the process. From a dissemination point of view, we then looked at how we actually reached the various roles that I mentioned earlier. Between ourselves and the Clean Sport Alliance group, we actually had a number of key personal contacts that we knew, whether that be governing bodies, professional bodies, as well as key influential actual athlete support personnel that could help disseminate that. So we threw this out there to the national governing bodies, the professional bodies, including the British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences, or BASES, the British Association of Sport and Exercise Medicine, the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register, and the UK Strength and Conditioning Association, to all help facilitate the survey and to help reach the practitioner on the ground. So looking at the completion rates, we had 67 individuals complete this. this was a lot lower than we were hoping for, expecting, when in comparison to, say, the coach study, which obviously had 341 responses. We feel that there was potentially a timing factor with all of this, as we were trying to reach, obviously, practitioners within that high performance sector. They were obviously working towards preparing for the delayed Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games, so their attention and thoughts were potentially elsewhere. However, we worked with our key partners to try and disseminate the survey as best we can. There were a number of partial completions that we had to strip out and remove, just to ensure we had a full and complete data set. So we noticed from this that the average sort of experience of the practitioner was a high level of experience, with 12.8 years, plus minus 8.6. So it was a highly experienced group of individuals completing this, and 2/3 of which identified with being members of professional bodies. So again, looking ahead towards those next steps, actually engaging and strategically working with those professional bodies, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be a really key important factor in how we interact and work with ASP. So hopefully that's provided you with some insight into our rationale for undertaking this work, how we went about it. So I'll now hand over to Claire, who will take you through the findings, the results, including the ASP education preferences, as well as the next steps in this piece of work.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so you can see there's a scale down the middle of this slide. I've got kind of positive points towards the top and negative points towards the bottom. Let's focus on the positive to start with. There were a high sense of agreement with between the athlete support personnel that took part, that they felt they had a professional responsibility, and they had a commitment to support UKAD's purpose in all of this. And they felt confident that they would undertake anti-doping actions, and they could be compliant in alignment with their own personal values, as it were. About half of the respondents said that they do actually receive positive recognition and feedback from, say, line management or colleagues within their governing body or within their circles in terms of their own actions related to anti-doping. However, if you think about it, that also means that around half do not receive that positive recognition. Maybe it's just not part of the culture. However, there were five respondents declared they had received negative reactions from others, such as disapproval, which obviously is not a great culture to be working within. We've thought about it, and it suggests that there might be a possibility that there needs to be more interaction and engagement from higher up within organisations, and then that can filter down and create a more positive culture of doing the right thing, which I think if we think back to the coach surveys, people do want to do the right thing, they do want to be there for the right reasons and speak up. So certainly something for us at UKAD to ponder in terms of how to get that working across the wider ASP pathway. Over on the right-hand side, there's a strong awareness of the importance of things like the prohibited list and keeping up to date with any changes in the code, where's checked for banned substances, etc. And the athlete support personnel say they are highly motivated, mainly by the need to protect the athletes, health and well-being being the main priorities, but they're also protecting integrity and reputation of themselves and the sport that they're working within, or sports that they're working within, and also the high level of motivation to prevent intentional and unintentional doping across their athlete group. They also said they would feel guilty if they didn't undertake actions to act against things that they saw as related to doping. So those, with Protect Your Sport as our campaign, or just reporting or speaking out against anything, they said they would feel guilty if they didn't do that, which is great. Across the survey, there was a 10-question knowledge check, and the average score for that was 8.5 out of 10, although correct answers for each question on that survey varied from between 5 and 10. So some people were scoring highly, obviously, and others not so sure. There was particular areas, or a couple of areas of confusion. So a couple of questions, one question being answered actually incorrectly 27 times. So that's clearly an area that we at UCAD need to think about and review our resources, check that everything is clear as to what is expected in that particular area. But almost a third of those respondents had actually engaged with the existing e-learning courses that are on offer from UCAD, and we'd hope that we could raise that figure with more tailored engagement going forwards. So on the next slide, please. We've focused on what ASP do to promote and support clean sport. There was this behaviour scale, and there were 5 subscales within this behaviour scale, and they're listed in this table. So we're looking at caring for athletes within and outside of sport, minimising the risk of athletes inadvertently doping, setting and upholding values and standards, educating athletes to reduce the risk of intentional doping, and the actual performing of practical anti-doping tasks or duties. And they were rated, the ASP, when they responded, they had to rate them in terms of how likely they were to perform these behaviours, 1 being never and 5 being very often. And the average ratings are on the right-hand side in that mean column. So as you can see, there was a more definite, more prominent role for ASP to be in the caring role, the caring capacity for athletes within and outside of the sporting context. Whilst also with the next one down, they're also trying to minimise the risk of athletes inadvertently doping. So that was great. Actually, at the lower end of that scale, they reported less interaction in terms of practical duties or tasks, such as chaperoning athletes through doping control, for example. So we found this really interesting, and it's important for us to recognise what ASP actually find themselves doing, so that we can tailor our support to them to meet their specific needs in supporting their athletes. So, for example, we may have less focus in future learning or education delivery for ASP in terms of what happens during the doping control process, because that isn't something they find themselves doing very often. It will still be touched upon, but they don't necessarily find themselves doing it. However, we probably do need to spend more time focusing on ensuring they're aware of how to check supplements and medications, because that comes under that minimising the risks for athletes inadvertently doping, and also spotting gateway behaviours. So as Emma again mentioned earlier with the caffeine in the child instance, this is something, again, if those kind of scenarios are built into education for ASP, then we're supporting them in an area where they find themselves doing the actual support. So that, again, that would then minimise that risk, that would stop athletes making decisions or inadvertently leading to doping. So ASP, in terms of their preferences, is some very similar to the coach feedback, as Paul had said before. Short, bite-sized offers, being very interactive with case studies that are relevant to them and recent. We're all well versed in the online virtual environment now, knowing that we can all come together as a group but be online, so it's much more accessible. But ASP equally want it tailored, as they did with the coaches side of things, and regular. So regular, short, bite-sized, interactive case studies delivered, in an online environment is essentially where we're looking. So they're going to be the opportunities that we're looking to provide for ASP moving forwards. So that essentially was phase 1 complete, and this is where we're heading to what we're now calling phase 2. So we decided in discussion with the initial research group that further detailed insight is really required, particularly because of the small number of respondents on this occasion. But rather than reopening the survey, we decided that phase 2 should be more about roundtable discussions. So we actually get the discussions that prove so valuable, for example, in the coach research that Emma conducted. And we are looking for expressions of interest. So a second call for expressions of interest this afternoon for anyone that is interested. This is essentially, we're in the early stages of planning this, but if there are any UK-based athlete support personnel from any background that would like to express an interest in forming part of those discussions, then please do email us at the address there at the education inbox. I myself have worked as a physiologist and sports nutritionist for over a decade in performance sport, so I'm going to be leading those discussions. I've worked with a variety of athlete support personnel over the years, and I'm hoping that we can together come to an agreement of what we want this education offer to look like. We're expecting to conduct these roundtable discussions later this year, taking place virtually, obviously, and we're hoping that by doing them later this year, we can avoid any specific key preparations leading up to Beijing Winter Games or Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. So again, I think that was part of the issue with with the research this year, maybe just a timing problem. We're going to try and make sure we can get as much insight as possible before you're all snowed under again. We're aiming to have a variety of roles at each roundtable discussion with representation from all areas of athlete support personnel. Now, it may be that we're able to have focus groups within those roundtable discussions, so we may bring people together that have a similar impact upon or influence upon athletes. But it really does depend on who expresses an interest in being involved. But hopefully, we're proposing a 60 to 90 minute session should be sufficient to gather enough insight from those people that do want to get involved. So finally, we'd just like to extend our sincere thanks to all those at the Clean Sport Alliance and all part of the research team that conducted that initial research, provided that invaluable insight so far, to continue the support that we've had from Leeds Beckett University in particular in this area of anti-doping research, and also to those who contributed so far in actually answering the surveys. We're hoping even more people want to be involved from this point onwards. So again, thank you, and I'll hand back to Charlie to see if there's any questions have come in for myself or Paul.
Thanks very much, Claire. And yeah, we might have to skip straight on to the to the next session, just because we're keeping an eye on the clock. But do keep the questions coming in. We've got a slot at the end where we can take questions all together. But yeah, do send those through, and we'll get back to you in one format or another. But thanks very much indeed to Paul and Claire. Another really interesting insight into some new research done through UCAD recently. Okay, so yeah, Claire touched on some of the partners who were supporting in that research, and just looking ahead to the agenda for tomorrow, we'll be hearing from some of those people in our panel session tomorrow as well. So do make sure you tune back in. If you are enjoying the session and want to share any thoughts, then please do so on Twitter, the hashtag CSFL2021, and we'll be sure to interact with you on there as well. So plenty of options to share your views and get in touch and spread the word about coaching and its role in clean sport. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Becky, my colleague, who's going to talk about UCAD's Clean Sport Hub and how we access digital learning. Thanks, Becky.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick reminder again, if you have any questions throughout this short section, please put it in the Q&A and hopefully have some time at the end. This is going to be a really short introduction to UCAD's Clean Sport Hub that was officially launched in April this year. So hopefully some of you may have already registered or activated your account on the system and access to e-learning available, which has been mentioned already today, which would be great. But each of the slides will have a QR code in the corner, which you can use to connect to the Clean Sport Hub. And we'll also share the link later. And as always, more information can be found on UCAD's website. So the Clean Sport Hub is UCAD's new platform for clean sport education. The hub will support the delivery of inventive and tailored education activities, leading to a culture of clean sport. As a learning management system, or LMS, it is a type of software that houses training material in a variety of forms and tracks users' learning over time. So the Clean Sport Hub will provide e-learning, as again, which has been mentioned already, but one of its core functions is to host our current e-learning courses, which is the Clean Sport Advisor and Coach Clean, and then also support our planned e-learning expansion. We're in the process of developing a new course for athlete support personnel called the Introduction to Clean Sport course. And this will replace the Clean Sport Advisor, and more communication will follow on this because we know that it's linked to a lot of job descriptions and qualifications. The new course will be split into 6 core modules, one being a Protect Your Sport module with the first look here. And we also plan to create additional modules that will be more relevant for specific roles. So for example, a therapeutic use exemption or TUE module, which will be more relevant for the support personnel involved in an athlete's medical treatment. This will delve deeper than the Introduction to Clean Sport course as a whole. We're also in the process of developing e-learning for athletes in the form of a series called Compete Clean, and this will be launched next year. So in addition to e-learning, the Hub will provide a range of relevant resources for each role, like the Clean Sport Essentials Guide for parents and carers, or the more timely updates like the 2021 Code Summary of Major Changes, or the Summary of Changes to the 2022 Prohibited List, which will be coming soon. It will also provide a base for the education team and UCAD as a whole to centralise training internally and externally. So, for example, the Educator Training course will soon be structured through the Hub, as well as the continual updates and training required as an educator. The Clean Sport Hub contains a booking management system with Zoom integration. This was a must for us when developing the system, as it will enable us to deliver webinars and online meetings, such as our Clean Sport Live webinar series for the Education Delivery Network, by the Hub, and track attendance and feedback in a centralised location. Learners will be able to join the webinar directly from their account, and their attendance will be added to their profile. But if you happen to miss the webinar, which happens a lot, you'll be able to access the recording directly through the Hub, and again, your viewing will be recorded. It's not just online events that can be organised and tracked with the system, but also in-person workshops. Due to COVID, we've been delivering our education workshops purely online. With the successful in-person workshops delivered at the recent School Games finals, we will be able to offer both. So as a learner, you'll be invited to relevant workshops based on your role. So this could potentially be linked to the Clean Games policy requirements. The information will be available on the Hub, and then again, your attendance will be marked. This will provide you with all of your Clean Sport education recorded in one place. And then finally, key and relevant to each of the elements discussed so far is the monitoring and evaluation of the education provision. The system will support assessments and surveys that will not only test the learner's understanding, but enable UCAD to assess the quality of the education and ensure that we're in line with the international standard for education. A session tomorrow afternoon, delivered by Ian Broadley and Paul Moss, will focus on recent research into survey scales and assessments that will be embedded into the Clean Sport Hub. All of these forms of education will support a blended, bite-sized learning approach, and I think the need for this has been evident through the research conducted, being discussed today and tomorrow. So you may have seen a resource or event that's relevant to your role on the previous slide, as well as a few that are less so. They were just a couple of examples. But a key feature of the Clean Sport Hub, which will support our goal of providing our learners with appropriate and relevant educational material, is our registration process. So whilst it may seem quite long, depending on your role, especially if you have lots of different involvements within sport, this part of the process is key. By learning about you and what your involvement is in sport, whether you're a physiotherapist and member of ACES or a student studying at university, we will then be able to provide that tailored education, including the e-learning, fact sheets, notices and workshops for you. If you do sign up to the system, it's important that you continue to update your profile, as when you progress in your sporting career, so will the information or detail you need to know. So by keeping your profile up to date, we can continue to provide you with the most relevant learning. So I'm just going to quickly run through the stages of the registration. With the first stage is your details. So the classic name, email, date of birth, country, and password. Second is where we find out about your sport involvement, and it's split into the core involvements within sport that align to UCAD's education strategy and athlete pathway. So we have the athlete, which is any person that competes in sport, a coach, a person involved in the direction, instruction and training of the operations of a sports team or of individual sport people, parent, carer or guardian, so a person responsible for the care of a child, support personnel, any person working with, treating or assisting an athlete in participating in or preparing for a sports competition, a student, so a person who is studying and attends an educational institution, teacher or a lecturer, so a person who teaches or assists with teaching in an education institution, a spectator or fan, so a person who's just interested and follows sport, and then finally UCAD personnel, so an employee of UCAD. And then the roles in blue are then asked what their sport is. And at this stage, you can select multiple roles. It will just mean you may have to answer a few more questions at the next stage, which is stage 3. So sports details builds on the information you've provided at stage 2 with a kind of decision tree-like process. So for the athlete, coach, parent and support personnel role, they will be initially asked what stage of the athlete pathway that they either compete, coach, their child competes, or they support. And then based on the answers provided, the next questions will be tailored. So for example, as a team manager for an elite squad, a follow-on question will be, are your athletes training to compete at an upcoming major games? This will then help us link to our major games education reporting and tracking. Say for students and teachers, we'll ask what stage of education they're currently learning or teaching. And then again, in the future, we could assign more specific resources for further education students aligned to the Clean Sport Accreditation Scheme. This is a long-term plan with a lot of these resources and courses in development or to be derived from the outcomes of recent research, but we are putting the foundations in place to enable this. And then finally, once all the fields have been answered, you can progress to stage 4, which is to review all the information you've provided, read and agree the terms and conditions, and then register. So then based on what information you've provided, the appropriate course will be assigned to your account. So as with any new technology, we will continue to learn, adapt and grow, and the Clean Sport Hub is no different. So if you have any suggestions or recommendations or issues, then please do contact the Clean Sport Hub at ucad.org.uk email. So hopefully you've got time for any questions now.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Becky. And that's definitely something that we're all really excited about in terms of just being able to open up access to all our clean sport education. And like I mentioned earlier, we saw a fantastic reaction when we launched that earlier this year and through Clean Sport Week, and we had our Coach Clean promotion as part of that, and it was really well received there. So yes, we're going to swiftly move on, just keeping an eye on the time. So we are now going to pass on to Terence O'Rourke, who's the Business Development Manager at LGC Science Group, and it's going to talk about informed sport, something that we are all very familiar with, and we'll be fascinated to hear a little bit more about their work and how they're involved in keeping sport clean. So, Terence, I will hand over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm just going to pull up the slide in the best way. I believe you can all now see it as I wish. Yes, as mentioned, we are going to now talk about informed sport, and thank you to UCAD for this opportunity to discuss it and discuss all things supplements. We're going to start the presentation today on the basis that supplements can be a risk to athletes and the fact that all athletes need to manage these risks. I'll go through in detail as to why they need to be managed, but certainly supplements have been a risk to athletes now for the past 2 decades and will continue to be so going forward. During this presentation, I will look at why supplements are a risk, how they become contaminated. I will then look at the issue from the perspective of athletes, how they are protected under the World Anti-Doping Code, the due diligence they are required to perform, and the responsibilities that they have if they decide to use supplements. I will then give some details as to how risk can be minimized in terms of how a product is manufactured and assessed, how it is tested, and how informed sport has been designed to try and provide a global and harmonized approach to supporting athletes on this issue. And I'll then leave you with a few takeaways which will hopefully help support you and athletes in terms of supplements usage. A good place to start though is with a general overview and a general introduction to informed sport, which I hope a lot of you know a little bit about already. It is essentially a global certification program that tests supplements for substances which are prohibited in sport by WADA, by the World Anti-Doping Agency. It's based on two fundamental pillars of quality assurance, and these are critical to take on board. The first one is that no product will become certified unless it completes a rigorous pre-registration assessment. This is where we look at the product in terms of its ingredients, its formulation, and the manufacturing behind it. Only when it has met the standards, and the very rigorous standards that we set, will it then be accepted onto the program. Following this, every batch of the certified product will be tested pre-release to market. And the purpose of this is to stop there being any products out there or inventory of certain batches that have not tested negative. This is the best way of protecting athletes and indeed protecting consumers. So what are the risks associated with the manufacturing of supplements? There are the three common causes of contamination. The first one is that contamination can be introduced through the raw materials. This is where contamination starts pretty much at the very beginning of the manufacturing process. The supplements industry is always striving for the next key ingredient to put into their products, to try and set them apart from their competitors. So very often they are looking at countries that can provide them with either the cheapest raw material or a raw material that will give them a certain edge on their competitors. And very often some of these countries may not have the same levels of quality assurance and quality controls that we have in the UK or other more developed nations. We also know more and more these days that brands are using what we call botanical ingredients or plant-based ingredients, and these can contain naturally occurring prohibited substances. Indeed, this is a significant challenge for our laboratory colleagues who are forever trying to get one step ahead in terms of what these complex botanicals contain. Now, the second way of contamination happening is through what we call cross-contamination. This is where it happens within the manufacturing facilities that may handle prohibited substances or may also manufacture pharmaceutical products, medicines, and they may have poor quality controls in place where contamination can cross over from either a banned substance they're handling or from a product that contains these banned substances. And the third cause of contamination is actually through adulteration, which I suppose isn't, in principle, isn't contamination because it's intentionally spiked. It's where brands will put prohibited substances into their products. And we know this happens, and we know there is a market for it. There are consumers out there who want to get a bit of a buzz, who want to get a kick before they go out and do their exercise. We also know that risk exists within the market because studies have repeatedly shown that products do contain banned substances, and these studies go back 20 years now. The first one of these was probably the largest study ever to be conducted, and that was a pan-European study, which was supported by the IOC, and the testing was conducted by the Cologne lab in Germany. They looked at more than 600 products from over, I think it was 13 countries, and a whole range of different types of products and different matrices. And of those, 14.8% contained undeclared steroids. So a significant risk in terms of the people who were using those products. HFL Sport Science, which is the laboratory, the name of the laboratory that is now owned by LGC, they did a follow-up study in 2007 where we looked at 58 supplements, and this was purchased either on the internet or through stores. And in that survey, 25% contained prohibited steroids and 11% prohibited stimulants. Follow-up studies in the UK in 2008 showed similar results. 10.5% of the products tested contained steroids and or stimulants. Similarly, a study conducted in Europe a few years later, 114 products were tested. And again, 10% came back containing either steroids or stimulants. And finally, a study was conducted in Australia, and this one actually looked at slightly more edgy products. We looked at 67 products, and 19% of them contained substances which are banned in sport. So clearly, the research has shown that supplements, despite the best efforts of manufacturers and the brands, still are a risk to consumers and to athletes who are using their products. But we also know it's a risk because of the number of cases of inadvertent doping that have occurred over the years. And a simple Google search would help you find that this is a fairly common occurrence. Athletes continue to commit doping violations as a result of contaminated products, contaminated supplement products. These are just a few of the examples. I have chosen one quite high profile doping violation from the last 5 or 6 years, starting with top Chilean tennis player Nicolas Jarry last year. Prior to that, there was a Springbok international. And we had from the world of triathlon, Beth Geddes from the USA. A little bit closer to home, Rhys Williams from the Welsh athlete who failed. And then we had the leading Jamaican sprinter Asifa Powell and another tennis player, Marin Cilic from Croatia. The case most closer to home, obviously, is the one of Rhys Williams. It was very unfortunate. He tested positive just prior to the Commonwealth Games due to be held in Glasgow. Wasn't able to compete in front of what was essentially been a home crowd. And it was down to a product that he had taken. He'd been told that it had been tested and it was certified. This wasn't correct. And as a result of that, I think he served I think it was a 4-month ban, and he missed competing in front of his home crowds. Now, had Rhys stuck to certain guidance in terms of using supplements, i.e. only use products which are certified on Informed Sport and every batch is tested, had he done his due diligence, there was a good chance that he may not have served quite the same suspension that he did. We also know that supplements are a risk because of the size of the industry and the messaging that they are able to deliver to athletes and consumers. And it's a very powerful industry, and they are very innovative, not only insofar as the products that they manufacture, but also the marketing behind those products. The industry was valued at approximately 17 billion in 2019, and they estimate it's going to grow to 31 billion in 2027. Now, the size of that machine behind the industry is significant, and it allows them to deliver a far more effective message in many ways than the guidance that athletes get from the likes of the anti-doping community or their coaches and sports. The voice of anti-doping, unfortunately, is not as powerful as that of the supplements industry. It is a successful marketing machine, and it's also supported by very high-profile endorsements and sponsorships. Many athletes and coaches believe in the benefits of supplementation, so it does not take too much to have a leading athlete endorsing a certain product to then get other athletes to follow his example. So the risks exist also in terms of what the industry is able to say to consumers and to athletes. It's also very clear to those of us that work within the certification and testing industry that the messaging is rather mixed. There is not a consistent approach across the anti-doping community on a global level, and there's not a consistent approach from sport or coaches, etc. Indeed, some sports still advise athletes not to use supplements. They just say it's not worth the risk. And yet, at the same time, we will see these endorsements from very high-profile athletes, or indeed from fellow athletes who will say to them, no, this has helped me train, helps me recover, perform. And so it's quite easy for them to ignore the advice they're given in this case and go ahead and take supplements. So that lack of clarity in itself increases risk for athletes. If they don't believe in the actual guidance and the messaging they're getting, they may well then go ahead and do something which they believe is the right way forward. Now, from an athlete perspective, there is certainly acknowledgement within the World Anti-Doping Code that there is a risk associated with sports nutrition products, with supplements products, and this is captured within the latest version of the code. What is very clear is that many athletes use supplements. There have been studies which indicate anywhere around between 80 and 90% of athletes have, not admitted, but have accepted that supplements are part of their lifestyle. And we also know that the IOC, in their latest consensus statement, has recognized that there are certain types of supplements that will give benefits to athletes, again, in terms of their training, their recovery, and their performance. Now, everybody on this webinar will know about the World Anti-Doping Code and the principle that underpins it, which is the principle of strict liability, which means that an athlete is fully and wholly responsible for what they put in their body. And it's very important to keep that front of mind. But there's also flexibility within the code that allows an athlete to show that the product they have taken has been responsible for the violation or for the positive test that they have produced. This is Article 10.6.1.2, which relates to contaminated products. And it allows a reduction in the period of ineligibility or the amount of time suspension based on no significant fault or negligence. Now, in order to be fully covered under that article of the World Anti-Doping Code, an athlete effectively has to just perform due diligence. They have to be able to show, if they commit a violation, that they did their very best in terms of taking a supplement to check that it had been certified, it had been manufactured to high quality standards, that had been tested negative, and that they were doing all they can to minimize the risk. So what should an athlete do in terms of performing or completing the due diligence, which will give them maximum coverage under the World Anti-Doping Code? First of all, they should only choose products which are on a certification and testing program like Informed Sport. Simply check the product is listed on the program website. Secondly, make sure the batch they are going to be using has been tested negative. Cross-reference the batch number from their product with the batch number on the website. Then also make sure that the program that the product is certified on requires secure storage of a sample for future testing. If an athlete fails a doping test and they believe it is due to a contaminated product, they then have to have that product tested again. So it's very important that there is storage of a secure sample for future testing if needed. And they should keep a record of all the products they've used and the batch numbers, have a diary of usage, take screen grabs and photographs from websites to show that the products they're using is indeed on the program, but also the batch number is also referenced on the website. And then they have to capture all of this on their doping control form on section 4, where similar to how they would capture, or reference and record medicines they're taking, they have to do the same with supplements to get full protection under the World Anti-Doping Code. Now, the great thing about Informed Sport is that it has been providing this ability for athletes to do their due diligence since 2008, when the program was introduced with the support of UK Anti-Doping, the Dutch Anti-Doping Authority, and one or two other experts in the field. Now, how do we minimize the risk? How do we show that an athlete who chooses the products on Informed Sport is minimizing the risk and doing their due diligence? There's two main ways. The first one is through the certification process, which I mentioned at the very start. This is where we will make a review of the quality systems behind the manufacturing of that product. We will look at the ingredients, the formulation. We will look at what raw materials are handled within the facility that manages it. We will look at all the standard operating procedures in terms of segregation, in terms of packing. We will make sure that there's an element of verification of label identity and contamination testing. We will look at whether it's GMP verified. And we will also test the product up to 5 times to give us a testing history and to make sure that we are confident there will be no issues with contamination going forward. We will then list the products on the Informed website so consumers and athletes can check. The second way that we minimize risk in the best way possible is by requiring 2 sealed samples of finished product for every batch of a certified product. We will test one of those samples for approximately 280 banned substances, and then we will keep the second sample for secure storage if indeed they need to go back and have that batch sample tested again. We will then list the tested batches on the website. This will allow athletes to cross-reference with the batches they're using, part of their due diligence. And there's an additional level of quality assurance. We will also conduct up to 4 blind tests per year. This is where we go into the marketplace, we purchase the product and we test it without the involvement of the brand or the manufacturer. Then that just gives us a certain high level of confidence. And finally, we will review the product on an annual basis just to make sure there haven't been any significant changes in terms of new raw materials being used or new manufacturing facilities. A good way often of showing the strength behind Informed Sport is by highlighting what we do not permit. We do not allow any of our brands or our customers to have misleading labels or claims on their websites. We don't allow, for example, things like 100% banned substance free or WADA approved. There's no such thing as WADA approved when it comes to supplements. And unfortunately, it is not scientifically possible to make 100% assurances in terms of being banned substance free. We do not permit composite testing. This is where some brands will want to take a small sample from multiple batches, put them all together and ask a laboratory to test it. We do not permit that because it dilutes the effectiveness of the testing process. We require a sample from every batch of a certified product on its own. Nor do we allow bulk testing, which is when some brands wish to send in a small sample of a very large batch before it's been packed off into different lots. We do not, again, allow that because it will dilute the effectiveness of testing. And on our website, we are totally transparent with every batch that has been tested. We list that specific batch. We do not have claims such as all batches tested, because that is no good. That doesn't provide any transparency behind the testing or the assurance that an athlete absolutely needs. We don't allow skip lot testing where brands may say, oh, we just want to test this one batch and have the product certified. That's not permitted. All of our processes and all of our testing is fully transparent. So athletes know that they are getting the best service in terms of minimizing risk, and indeed the brands know how rigorous the whole process is. Now, I talked about due diligence earlier and how athletes have to keep a record of the products they've used. And I just want to show here some of the components to assisting them in that. The Informed Sport website allows a range of different functionalities, but you can start off by doing a simple search for a product, or you can certainly go in there and use it to search by brand. We have hundreds of certified brands now. You can check on the brand and bring up their range of products. Alternatively, you can search by product name, and when you do that, it will bring up a dedicated product page, and that will have obviously the product name. It'll have an image of the product, so you can make sure that what you're using is not hopefully counterfeited. And it will also have the batch number, which you can again cross-reference. Again, use all this information to store and to capture and to record for doping control purposes, and have it on your doping control form. Take screen grabs, take photographs. And indeed, we launched earlier or late last year, we also launched the Informed Sport app, where athletes can now use simple QR coding. They can scan a product just to make sure that it is tested and it is certified on the program. So very convenient and very, very simple to use. In terms of minimizing risk, I believe there is also an extra element to what we're able to provide because of the testing and anti-doping expertise that exists at LGC, which is the international life sciences company which manages and administrates the Informed Sport program. We have 2 laboratories, one based in Fordham, just outside Newmarket in the UK, and one based in Lexington in Kentucky. Both are ISO 17025 accredited, so similar to the WADA accredited labs. We screen for approximately 280 banned substances nowadays using LCMS and GCMS, And last year we also made a major investment into HRAM instrumentations as well. And obviously our screen is based on the WADA prohibited list, and we make sure that we keep a close idea of that list, and every year when it is published, we'll make sure that if there are any extra threats that we have them covered within our screen. We believe that we are, well, we're fairly sure that we are one of the best anti-doping laboratories in the world. We've been involved in doping control for 55 years now. When you consider that WADA itself is only 21, 22 years old, it shows the level of expertise and heritage that we have at our laboratories. As well as testing supplements, we also do the doping controls for equine sports, for the horse racing. We work for the International Equine Federation. Indeed, we were the testing lab for equine sports at London 2012 and the Rio Olympic Games. We've been testing supplements since 2004, and we have a pretty unique range and expertise in terms of drug testing within the laboratory. As a result of this, we're very pleased that our program has become global, within the last decade or so. We now have slightly more than 1,300 certified products on the program. We work with nearly 300 certified brands, and we have a global footprint which reaches into 36 countries. And we're also delighted to say that the program is recognized and acknowledged by a whole range of anti-doping organizations and NADOs, as well as sports organizations and advisory groups from across the world. We are very focused on keeping this lines of communication open with sports, anti-doping and trade organizations. Indeed, we recognize the fact that supplements, in terms of managing the risk, it's not a matter of delivering the education once behind it. It has to be delivered on a regular basis. And this is something which LGC and Informed Sports has become very adept at doing. So a few takeaways from this presentation. First of all, supplements are a risk. They will continue to be a risk, and possibly there may be a period of time in the next few years where that risk may be heightened due to some of the supply chain issues that the industry is experiencing as a result of COVID. But what is very clear is that responsibility lies with athletes and to a lesser degree to the personnel who are supporting them. We know athletes use supplements on a regular basis. We know sports and sports teams provide supplements to their athletes on a regular basis. And there is a general acknowledgement now that there are benefits to an athlete in terms of using supplements. But due diligence is vital, because without doing proper due diligence, an athlete will not be fully protected under the code. Informed Sport allows athletes and indeed their sports personnel to perform maximum due diligence, and we're delighted that we've been able to provide a protection program, a program that protects athletes on a global level. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, and I look forward to answering any questions if indeed there are some. Thank you.
Thanks, Terence, for those really interesting points. We do have a few questions. Could you turn your video on, Terence, and then people can see you as you answer? That'd be great. Turn your camera on, and then we'll take a few questions. We need to wrap up at 3. I noticed that we've got quite a few around CBD, and if you're in the audience today and would like to come back to us tomorrow, we'll also have a session on CBD itself. But I don't know, Terence, if you're able to answer the main points coming through there, which is, are you going to be able to test CBD products? You just need to unmute, I think, now.
Yeah, thank you. We can certainly test CBD products, but what we cannot do is certify them. And there's a number of reasons for that. Primarily, it comes down to the fact that there has not been enough in terms of research and study around the complexity of CBD and cannabinoids. So at the moment, although CBD is permitted by WADA, the other cannabinoids are still prohibited in competition. And we also know that the regulators allow for a certain amount of THC to be allowed within CBD products. Although it's a very small amount, we do not know whether an accumulated use of CBD could lead to an athlete then failing a doping control test. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that some of the research has shown that although CBD products may have a small amount of THC in, we've also noticed that there are other banned cannabinoids within them as well. So until such a time as there is more assurance and perhaps more oversight of this industry, we do not think it is correct to be permitting them onto the program, because there is still some doubt as to whether or not they may lead to a doping violation. The chances are they may not, but until such time as we know that from a scientific perspective, we have to be very cautious.
Great, that's a really helpful explanation, thank you. And then just one other question I'll bring up from the Q&A before we finish. Somebody's asked a question as to whether, has it ever occurred that actually there's been a positive case from a supplement that's been passed and certified as clean, effectively?
Thankfully, not yet. No, we think we do a very good job in terms of assessing a product before it comes on the program, and then we have very rigorous testing of every batch. What I can say though is that from time to time, a batch will fail a test. We will identify a banned substance in it. That batch is then not allowed to go onto the market. So the inventory from that product is not allowed to go in. And that also then triggers a significant review of that product and whether we're allowed to keep it on the program. So the good news is no, not yet. And but we absolutely appreciate that the whole trust behind Informed Sport is based on that not happening. So we are very focused on not only on our testing, but on making sure that the program is as rigorous as possible.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for your presentation this afternoon. I'm going to wrap up the day now. So thanks very much to all our speakers who've taken part. I hope you found the day really interesting and learned something and taken it away. Certainly for me, the key points are around the exciting opportunities that these new research programs can bring. We're looking forward to collaborating with different organisations, different researchers, different types of organisations and people that we've worked with before. So even if you're not an academic partner, but you're interested in our Insight and Innovation programme, please get in touch with us. And I think the research has shown just how, these sessions have shown just how useful the research is and how we can involve that in our day-to-day work through improving our anti-doping education. And the partnership working is going to be key to maximising this going forward. I hope you found the information about the developments on our Clean Sport Hub useful. This really is the beginning of being able to present new different types of programs to you, and we hope to be able to develop many more specific role education programs as we go forward. Thank you to Informed Sport, thank you to Terence O'Rourke, an important reminder of supplements. I'm sure you will remember our mantra in Clean Sport Education, which is assess the need and assess the risk for looking at supplements. And tomorrow we'll have a bit more time, as I mentioned, on CBD in general, where we'll have a presentation from Professor Graham Close of Liverpool John Moores University. So I hope you'll be able to join us at this time again tomorrow, where our session will be lasting a little bit longer. We've also got presentations from Dr. Ian Bordley of University of Birmingham, Professor Andrea Petrosky of Kingston University. Paul O'Donovan will be joining us from Sport Island. We'll be having UCAD's own Mario, who's head of our investigations team, as well as straight back from Tokyo. We'll be pleased to introduce Ali Jawad, very well-known para-athlete, to look specifically at some of the issues around para-athletes and the para clean sport education system. So hope you'll come back tomorrow ready with more questions, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much. Bye.